guys, welcome to my channel. Let's talk about all the movies I've watched recently. So April was a great month for me. I watched a lot of movies that I really enjoyed and a lot of them were on Tubi, so these are free. The first horror movie I watched in the month of April is Apollo 18. This is a found footage horror from 2011 that focuses on a group of astronauts who are sent to the moon on a secret mission in 1973, which I think is a year after the official moon landing. And this one was a secret mission that no one knows about because something horrific happened while these astronauts were out there. They documented it, so we're watching the footage of the horrific events that happened. I think this one is cool in concept. I love the setting and the actors are great, and just the overall vibe of being in space with this horrifying situation going on around you. I felt very claustrophobic and you could feel the isolation and fear. I do think that they did some cool things with what they had. Overall, I think it's a solid found footage horror. Then I watched Soul Survivors from 2001, and this movie is bad. It's not good, but there's like a weird charm to it. It stars Eliza Dushku, who is the main reason for watching this movie because she's just excellent. She's just feisty, she's hot, she's basically Faith from Buffy in this. So this follows a group of friends who are out partying at a rave and they get into this really horrific accident. One of the friends dies and then the other start just acting weirdly. All this weird stuff starts happening to the driver, and she is like being stalked by these weird creepy people from the rave or something like that. This movie doesn't make sense. There's a lot of stuff happening. I don't know, I feel like there's an interesting idea here revolving around grief and trauma and loss and all of that stuff, but I just feel like it wasn't executed very well. I do love the whole aesthetic. It's very early 2000s. The music, just that whole vibe, it's very nostalgic, and I think that it's one of those watches that you can just throw on and not really use a lot of brain power. It's on Tubi. I think it's good if you're looking for a nostalgic watch. Then I watched Dead Man's Curve, or The Curve, 1998, which is also on Tubi, and this one stars Matthew Lillard. This is about a group of college kids who learn that they can get straight A's if their roommate dies. So they essentially put a plan together to get their roommate to kill himself. Things don't go right, obviously, and this one is just also another product of its time. It's very twisty, perhaps a little too twisty, where there's just one twist after the other. However, I think it's a lot of fun, and Matthew Lillard in this is phenomenal. He's essentially Stu Macher from Scream. That's basically it. He's him. He's getting to eat up every scene, and he's the reason to watch this movie. I think he had a lot of fun doing this. I really like this one. I think it's fun, and I think the twists are fun, even though they're a little bit over the top, but that's what I love. Then I watched Horror in the High Desert 2, Minerva, which is also on Tubi, and I loved this one so much. So you don't have to watch part 1 to enjoy this one, and I think this one is a lot better than the first one. So it follows one woman who mysteriously dies and one woman who mysteriously disappears, and it's told in the same mockumentary style. I feel like the structure of this movie was a lot better than the structure of the first one. So they're incorporating all of the interview documentary style elements of the story, and they're intercutting all the found footage elements to it. So you're constantly on the edge of your seat watching what these women went through. You're seeing dash cam footage, you're seeing doorbell cams and cell phone footage and stuff like that. And it just was so intense for me and anxiety inducing. I was like so nervous for the women, and I think that it did a really great job at building up these terrifying moments and putting you in the shoes of the female characters who are experiencing these really horrific things out in the middle of nowhere. It is really good with doing these quiet, subtle scares, like the kind of scares that happen in the background. It's so effective and well done in this movie, and there's one particular scene that happens with a car, and you're seeing stuff happen while the character is completely unaware. There's a moment that I actually screamed. It made me scream because I was just like not expecting it. It's just horrifying to imagine yourself in that scenario, and I think that's why I was able to connect with it more, is because it's focused on women who are just vulnerable in this situation, and I could imagine myself being in this situation and oh my god, what would I do? They did a really great job at not showing too much of the main horror, but showing just enough and there's moments where you see like the cast of a shadow or the outline of somebody in the darkness, and it is so scary. I think they just did such a good job. I was on the edge of my seat with this one, and I really enjoyed this one, and I'm excited for the next one. Highly recommend this one. Then I watched another found footage horror movie. This is on Tubi. It's called Inner Demons. So this is about a young girl who is addicted to drugs, and it's about the intervention style reality crew who are documenting her experience, and her family makes her have an intervention, and then she agrees to go to rehab, and the crew follows her to rehab to document her recovery. But they quickly learn that the reason she is using drugs is because she is possessed, and she's trying to hold down the demon within her. And so slowly over the film, as she's withdrawing from drugs and she's getting clean, the demonic possession stuff is starting to heighten and get more intense over the course of the film. I thought this was a really unique concept, and it leads up to one of the most shocking finales I've ever watched. It just was not expected for me, and I really liked the cast. I thought the intervention style TV crew following them was really cool, and I think it's a lot of fun. It's definitely a hidden gem. Then I watched The Harbinger, which is from 2022. This is a COVID set horror about a woman who goes to help her friend who is having these really terrible nightmares. And when she gets there, she discovers that these nightmares are contagious, and she begins experiencing them too. And in these nightmares, these women are being stalked by this plague doctor-like demon, and I think this one is so good. It's very creepy and effective, and it has some really great performances and really unique dream sequences. I think they did a great job at creating these dream worlds, and this demon is terrifying, and he looks creepy, and just the whole overall concept was really unique and creative, and I think it was really good. Then I watched a found footage horror called The Frankenstein Theory, starring Chris Lemke from Ginger Snaps. He's the reason I watched this, and overall I think this one is really fun. It's about this film crew who is investigating this guy who believes that Frankenstein's monster is real, and he takes this crew with him to a location where Frankenstein's monster has been spotted. And when they get there, all hell breaks loose. Love the cast of this, and I love the setting. It's kind of like a snowy Arctic setting. I love the whole concept of Frankenstein's monster. I think him being real, that's just so cool. It feels very much like Bigfoot. The idea of Frankenstein's monster being real is silly, but I think Chris Lemke really sells it here, as he does in everything. I think it's a quick, fun movie, and if you love found footage horror, you'll love this one. And I watched another found footage hidden gem on Tubi called Crone Wood. This is an Irish folk horror found footage about this couple who are on their first date. It's going great. They decide to take a hike in the woods, and then they encounter these group of masked people, and it gets weirder from there. And I really enjoyed this one, surprisingly. At the beginning, I was like, I don't know if I'm gonna like this. Who goes on a hike on a first date? I don't know. But as the story goes along and you learn more about the area they're in, and you meet other characters in this area where they're hiking, it just feels very creepy, very folk horror, and I loved that this whole concept that the story revolves around. It felt very much like Wicker Man-esque. There's some really cool masks in this movie. I thought they were really just unsettling. I think the whole concept is interesting, and I don't want to say too much to spoil it, but I was pleasantly surprised at where this story goes, because I thought it was just going to be a regular slasher in the woods horror, but it is not that. It becomes something completely bigger than that, and I think they did a really good job with the story. And it's set in Ireland. I want to go to Ireland so bad and meet an Irish man. Then I watched another found footage horror called Lexi, and this one, it started off so good, and it had the same vibes as Leaving DC. It's written, directed, and acted by the main lead in the film. Her name is Victoria Vertuga. I think she's fantastic in this. The story centers on this popular YouTuber who moves into a new home, and she begins getting strange activity around her house, and she basically learns that she's being stalked by someone, and it increases in depravity over the course of the film. And you slowly watch her reacting to this situation and watching how her viewers and people on the internet are criticizing her for it and not believing her, and then you slowly watch her unravel as she's experiencing this horrific thing. Love that whole concept. I love that setup, but the story didn't really progress in any way. It was just the same thing over and over, and I wanted to see more of the stalker element. I wanted there to be more of the horror and paranormal, but what we got was just mostly the psychological effects of this stuff playing out on the main character, which I think is great. I just wish they would have elevated it a little bit more with an actual event happening in the story. I think it was so promising, and I think that the lead is great. Like, I immediately connected with her, and you could see why she would be a popular YouTuber, because she's just so charming and endearing, and it just overall fell short for me towards the end. And I watched Evil Dead Rise, and I watched it twice because I loved it so much. I have a full review up on my channel, which I'll link down below. So this one is the latest entry in the Evil Dead series. It's about this family in a high-rise apartment that is essentially being stalked by deadites, and they infect the mom of the family. She becomes possessed, and she is incredible. She steals every scene she's in. She's just so mesmerizing to watch. Every little thing she says, every movement, her facial expressions, she's perfect, and she was made to be a deadite. And I also love the family. I really felt like they introduced us to them, and they felt like a real family, and I cared for them. There's some great scares, great moments, and bloody, gory moments, and I particularly love the use of the peephole to show us through the POV of the peephole of what's happening outside their front door. There's just a lot of moments that made me laugh. It was silly at times, it was over the top, and I just had a lot of fun with it. I think it's a great entry in this series. I think it's perfect for newer fans just getting into this series, and I hope they do more with this story. I feel like the director has hinted that this is canon to the other stories in the Evil Dead universe, so it would be really cool to see them come together somehow. And then I ended the month with not a movie, but a TV show on Apple TV called Blackbird, and it's not exactly horror, but it deals with some pretty horrific stuff. It's more true crime, and it's fantastic. It's about this guy who gets arrested for running drugs and guns and stuff. So he gets sentenced to like 10 years in prison, and then he's approached and they're like, hey, we'll shave off your prison sentence if you transfer to this high security, maximum security prison to talk to this serial killer and get him to tell you where a body is of one of his victims. And he agrees to it, and it's just really well done. I think the performances are fantastic, and it's scary thinking of the situation, and it's horrifying what this guy did to people, and it's based on a true story. I think they handled it really well, and I highly recommend it if you're into true crime. And there you have it. That's everything I watched in the month of April. Let me know what you watched in April, and let me know if you've watched any of the movies I discussed. And thank you so much for watching, guys. I will catch you next time. Bye.